Like Professor Wren said, I'm Madison. I am sponsored by the lovely Dr. Dan Castillo. I would just take a moment to thank him for not only inspiring this project through his class, but also helping me stay motivated and supporting me the whole way through this. So to get started, I'm just going to give a brief background on music videos and the connection to gender. Typically, we tend to put music into genres because it makes it easier for us to process what we're hearing and then to associate it with things in our own lives, our culture, or society as a whole. This is kind of similar to what we tend to do with humans. You see someone and you automatically start categorizing them based on their social identities. So we do the same thing with music. And now, since we have music videos, we also do it with music videos. I thought it was really interesting when I was doing my research to find out that an artist cannot have a single rank highly on the charts without it being accompanied by a music video. It's very rare that any artist who releases a single and doesn't have a music video will even make it into the Billboard Top 100. So it's crucial to their artists, their success, and their management and their brand. So since that, singles and music videos have become a package deal. You do one, you have to do the other. But artists go about it in different ways. Some artists choose to have the visuals directly reflect the lyrics in the song, whereas others use the imagery of the music video to portray a completely different aesthetic, vibe, and scenario. But I'm going to go with how the lyrics directly reflect the music video. So, as seen in Taylor Swift's music video for her song Love Story, it has an image of her dressed up in a princess dress and then a man who's supposed to be the prince. In this case, she goes by Juliet, he goes by Romeo, kind of referring back to Shakespeare. But it's extremely powerful because recently, actually like last Friday, Taylor Swift re-released her album Fearless. It's called Taylor's version. This was because she was in a contract where she legally did not own her master recordings and was forbidden from re-recording them for a max amount of years. So now she's been able to, and the imagery in this is so powerful because she is now wearing Romeo's t-shirt. This shows that she's made a transition and that she's also going against the gender norms that once constricted her. Taylor Swift overall is very powerful in the industry. She's been in the industry for a really long time, so I feel like she's a great example to look at how a young woman enters the industry and how she creates her career over the years. She's probably the most successful artist for utilizing brand reinvention. She coined the term era and she's profited off her transitions. She says this is fueled by her need to constantly be praised and her fear that there's a better version of herself out there. But this is pretty common in the entertainment industry as a whole because once women turn 30, they become disposable, while men never age out of the industry. When you think about the amount of men who have been in the industry for a very long time compared to the same as women, the only person you may think of is Meryl Streep. It's very rare. But she's been able to maintain this by constantly changing her look and her aesthetic with every album. So every album's an era, and they're each marked by something in particular. She not only is good at the brand reinvention, but she did one thing in the pandemic that set her out from every other artist in the industry. While the music industry as a whole was facing a large loss of revenue due to the cancellation of live music events, a decrease in sales of physical records, and a loss of licensing revenue due to TV shows and films pausing recording, Taylor Swift used this time to write and record two albums that have no intention of ever being played at a stadium tour. This allowed her to go back to her roots and really focus on storytelling, producing raw and vulnerable lyrics, as well as having less production elements. This album really flows like a campfire story, and it definitely has the essence of its name, which is folklore. She named the album Folklore to establish that the stories that she was telling were fictional and were based on made up characters. This is because in the past, people assumed every song she has ever written was about one of her own relationships, whereas in reality, she wrote about herself, her friends, her family, TV characters, and even she just made up stories. So she did not take any chances and made it very clear this time. Her music video for the single Willow relies on descriptive lyrics accompanied by minimalistic images, and this allows it to create an eerie, ethereal cottagecore aesthetic. Cottagecore is an aesthetic that gained popularity in 2020, and it's characterized by minimalistic attitudes, a care for nature, and mystical powers. It's also very heavily tied to natural witchcraft, and Taylor Swift really built on this within her music video. As you can see on the right hand side, she had this image of women dancing around a fire in the woods, which is a reference to the crucible. And this isn't the first time she's referenced witchcraft. In one of her other songs called Don't Blame Me, she said, "They're hunting the witches even if you aren't one. So light me up." So she declares that she's a witch. You know, she's the evil woman in this scenario, and she's building off of that and making a profit from it. There's an overwhelming sense also of divine femininity in the witchcraft, particularly in nature witchcraft, because it has a connection to Mother Earth and to the goddess Luna, which is the moon goddess. In the music video, Taylor also demonstrates her own magical capabilities by disappearing through a chest and having a gold aura come out of her fingers. Continuing on with our discussion of Taylor Swift, we have to acknowledge the privilege that she does have. She has a net worth of $4 million, and she has many, many social privileges, but yet she still faces discrimination based on her gender. This is an example of the oppressed oppressor. So in this case, she is oppressed while she still is an oppressor due to her being white. There's many examples of Taylor Swift experiencing this discrimination, but I'm going to focus on one that stands out very heavily, which was when she was sued by a DJ for the loss of his job after the DJ had groped her during a meet and greet. The act was caught on camera and there were many witnesses, and Taylor and her team reported it to the radio station, and subsequently they fired the DJ. However, years later after the incident, he sued her for libel and for his loss of income, but she countersued for a symbolic $1. She won that $1, and she created a precedent that said victims are not responsible for the consequences their assaulters face. And she really referenced this in her music video, Look What You Made Me Do. As seen in the right-hand image, on the left corner near her shoulder, there is the $1 bill. Unfortunately, this is a scenario that's very common, both in the industry with the Me Too movement, along with in society as a whole, where men with rape allegations are elected president and appointed to the Supreme Court. So moving into a discussion on fangirls, this is a quote that started off as a joke but has become an anthem for fangirls around the world. It reads, "I am three things and three things only: a feminist, a directioner, and your worst fucking nightmare." A directioner is a fan of One Direction, and as I'll discuss in a few slides, fangirls really build their community off of a sense of feminism. So fangirls are fans simply who identify as women, but unfortunately it has a lot of negative consequences and connotations due to people automatically assuming fangirls are crazed. A lot of this dates back to Beatlemania, where they really focused on girls fainting, screaming, and crying, and they do that even now, especially with boy bands such as One Direction or BTS. But what's actually really interesting is that these fangirls are actually keeping artists um, more relevant and making more income for that artist than their own brand teams could ever imagine doing. This is because there are millions of fangirls around the world who are constantly sharing the artist's music, their images, and essentially just campaigning for them. These fangirls, they run fan accounts. The fan accounts are so significant that they're competing with news outlets such as TMZ and ET Tonight. They get exclusives from the artists themselves and their teams, as the artists and their teams have realized the potential that fangirls have for them. So they're using them as essentially a free way to market the artist by providing these inside scoops, which also make the fangirls feel good because they're directly working with the artists that they admire. They also are creating canon and non-canon art. They're also leading social and political campaigns, such as when Musician Harry Styles was seen out in LA not wearing a proper mask during the pandemic. Within an hour, it was trending on Twitter, wear a mask, Harry. And even though they were, dedicated fans of him, the social and political movement mattered more than the artists themselves. There also has been a big change lately in terms of the movie industry. A lot of fan fictions are not only getting book deals, but are now also getting movie deals. One that I want to highlight is called After. It was originally written on an app called Wattpad for free. It was a Harry Styles fan fiction, but when they created it into a book and a movie, they changed the name Harry to Harden. Even though they still used his likeness, the main character has pretty much exact tattoos as Harry Styles, and he even wears Harry's famous Ramones shirt. On May 22nd, 2017, in Manchester, Ariana Grande closed her concert for her Dangerous Woman tour by blowing a kiss, but this was different than every other show because a moment later, a bomber detonated his weapon, killing 22 people and injuring 800 people, mostly of which were young girls and women. It was the deadliest attack in the UK since the London bombings in 2005. This was an act of gender terrorism. Gender terrorism is an attack intended to use violence and fear to reinforce gender stereotypes and misogyny, a form of terrorism feared by politicians as it would require a strong national and international response to address the systematic violence women face. So no one wanted to admit that this was a calculated attack meant to kill and harm young women and girls. Some news outlets even went as far to blame the young victims and say that they should have never been at such a sexual concert in the first place. Um, but the main question a lot of people had was why was the Ariana Grande concert targeted and not a different event? There was a concert by the band Kiss just a few days prior, and a few days later, there was a wrestling event scheduled. But Kiss and a wrestling event tend to appeal to a more demographic that is white, older, and are men. It was also a crime against Ariana Grande herself, as she is a liberated, sex positive, successful woman who was bold enough to declare that God is a woman. Grande eventually returned to Manchester and visited those who were injured in the attack and organized a charity concert for the victims and their families. And on her next album, she honored her fans and the victims on the song Get Well Soon, which finishes with 40 seconds of silence to bring the runtime to 5 minutes and 22 seconds in honor of the date of the event, 5/22. This was an event that really hit me as a young teenage girl watching these events occur because I know what that excitement is like leading up to a concert. The post show high and the atmosphere of a concert venue as the one place that people can tend to be themselves with no judgment. However, this attacker was trying to take that away from fangirls. On the other hand, fanboys tend to be thought of as men who are fans. They typically, when you read research about fanboys, it focuses heavily on sports culture and then also on gaming culture and sci-fi. This is very different than what you find when you look up fangirls. I chose to use ethnography for my project because fandom really is a culture, and any human and cultural involvement in the process of creating a fandom was very fascinating to me, and I thought it was important to our society as a whole. So I used a survey to supplement semi-structured interviews due to the pandemic. I was not able to interview people in person, but this did allow for anonymity, which resulted in brutal honesty, which was really what my project needed, and it allowed me to make a lot of observations. I distributed the survey through the internet using Facebook, Snapchat, email, and text. The demographics were all fans who identified as men, mostly of which were Latinx, and most of which were college aged. I asked them about their listening habits, who they listen to, where they listen, how often they listen, and what music videos they watch. I also asked them though about feminism and sexual objectification. Before I move to my next slide, it's very key to understand that 55% of the participants said that they are not feminists. This was a question I posed that brought a lot of feedback I didn't expect. I asked, do you think women artists are treated as sexual objects? What about men artists? These are three key responses that were exceptionally patronizing. And I do believe that me being a woman researcher and that being known because I was using my personal accounts did take into an effect on the answers that were given. In addition to these answers, which you can see, things were put in all caps. It was kind of like making fun of the question. On a different question, I had a respondent tell me how I should have worded the question, and he never ended up actually answering the question itself. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I got these answers because it really speaks to the whole point of my presentation. Sexism is in the entertainment industry, and it simultaneously reflects and furthers sexism in society. So, to wrap things off, pop culture is a subculture of American culture, and the issues of the broader culture are present both in entertainment and in our broader culture as well. There's no world where art and politics are separate entities, as they all influence one another. The entertainment industry is not trivial. It both speaks to what's happening and it also adds to the conversation. And also, fangirls are not these crazed young women. They are forces of nature shaking up the industry, and they are our future. Industry can start conversations that make change, and that's really what we're beginning to see in the entertainment industry, but we still have a very long way to go. We need to stop with saying, oh, well, that's Hollywood. That's how things have always been done. Because fangirls are showing us that they matter and that they're powerful and they're not going to stand for the simple, oh, that's how it's always been. And I truly believe that this is just the start of the rise of fangirls, not only in the music industry, but in our society as a whole. So thank you.